All right. It's been 7 years, but I think we can do it. I think we can get through this episode, right? We can do it. It's going to be hard, but it's how we push through. We got to get through it even when it comes to the hard stuff. Especially on a day like today, June 1st. June 1st has always been a hard day. But let me tell you why. First off, what's up, everyone? I'm Anthony K. Thomas. I am a author, independent author, and if this is your first time here, welcome to my AKT Publishing channel. And for a while, for a little over about a week or so, every few days or so, I'll get on here and tell a story from this book right here, My Life in a Nutshell. It is a memoir. It is my memoir. It's about my life. It's the most open I've ever been about my life. And normally I can be a pretty private person. I can keep to myself. And there's only so many people that I can open up to. But doing this has really made me more of an open book. Has made me be able to answer questions I would normally have a hard time answering. So, and writing this book also helped. But so, if you're interested in reading this book right here, there is a Linktree link in my bio. Go ahead and click on that. Take you to my Linktree page. You will find My Life in a Nutshell, as well as many other books and short stories I have available now. What I normally do is I pick a chapter and I tell a story. I tell a story within that chapter. I don't read anything from this book, although because of what today is, I might make the exception to that one rule that I made for myself in doing that. That I might read a little something from the chapter that I am going to be telling a story from. So today is June 1st, and June 1st was my father's birthday. He died January 8th, 2019. It was a Tuesday. And I remember that not only because I remember that mostly, this might sound messed up if you're not a pro wrestling fan, but Tuesday was the same day that he died, was also the same day that WWE SmackDown was on at that time. And I remember that because that Tuesday night I watched SmackDown, and it helped. And watching WWE program is like being in my own escape, my own little paradise for a little while. Allow me to escape when I can't actually escape for a while. Normally, I would go to Sausalito, but I haven't been to Sausalito in 2 years, mostly because I can't afford the gas to drive there and back. I have to preserve the gas, and I've been doing that over the last 2 years, and even more so nowadays. So yeah, I haven't been to Sausalito in a little over 2 years. I want to go back. I miss being able to walk around Sausalito for a while and then go over to the Marin Highlands and be able to park up on the hill and just stand there, feel the breeze, look at the Golden Gate Bridge from close enough from a distance, but not too far away, and just feel at peace while I was there. I miss it. It's been 2 years since I've been there, and I know eventually when I know I can afford, to drive there, then I will. So for now, I still have WWE that does that for me. But anyway, so my father died January 8th, and what I wanted to do is just tell a story about who my father was to me, and do my best to tell a story of who my father was in general. I will start by saying that my father kept a lot of things to himself. There was so much that he took to his own grave. But I will do my best with what I know of what my father allowed me and my mother to know. So what I will start by saying is that my father was born June 1st, 1939. He was born in Louisiana, and he lived there. He had three older sisters. He was the baby, and he lived there until he was about 5. And his mother, he never met his father. His mother, single mother, and they lived there until they were about 5. And then they packed the car and they moved to Los Angeles, California. And that's where he spent the rest of it for the majority of his life. That's where he grew up. That's where he was raised. He did not finish high school because he felt at a certain point he reached in high school that his time could be spent doing something more important. He wasn't sure what that was, but it was not school. So my dad never graduated from high school. This would have been around the 50s, I would say. And he ended up joining a gang. And when he was with that gang for a while, and then when it got too dangerous, I mean, joining a gang is a risk and is dangerous. And my father felt like it was the best way for him to earn money and help with his mother when it comes to buying groceries and putting food on the table. And that was good for a while until his life was in jeopardy. And then he felt like he had that happen, and he had a bit of a falling out with his mother. There was a very big argument that she kicked him out of the house, and he was left with either completely fall into this gang altogether or leave. And he left Los Angeles, and he made his way from Southern California to Northern California, working all these odd jobs where he could, worked on a farm. He eventually met this woman and had 3 kids with this woman. And I will tell you their names. I don't know what the woman's name was, but my father's first wife, kids were Renee, Yvonne, and Jay. Those were my half siblings. And that didn't work out between them. And that was in Sacramento. And then he left Sacramento, and he moved and got a job in Glen Ellen, California. And he got a job working at the Sonoma Development Center. And that's where he met my mom. He was one of the cooks there, and he met my mom while my mom was working at a unit on the Sonoma Development Center. I believe it was called Stoneman. I believe that's where they met, was right there. Was the name of the unit on the grounds of Sonoma Development Center. And Sonoma Development Center was in this very small town in the middle of Glen Ellen, called Eldridge. So like, if you were driving from Sonoma, whether you were taking Highway 12 or Arnold Drive, when you hit a stop sign, and that stop sign and that street name said Madrone, you were in Glen Ellen. And then there was the firehouse on the corner, and then you would drive down, you keep driving on Madrone, you're passing an entrance into Glen Ellen Manor. There were 3 entrances into Glen Ellen Manor. There was one off of Arnold Drive, one on Madrone, and then one down on another street. But anyway, if you stay on Arnold, you keep going all the way down, you pass a mini mark. a mini mart and gas station, and then there's a garage mechanics, and then after you pass that garage, you enter onto Eldridge. You enter onto Eldridge, which is Sonoma Development, which is the very small little town of where Sonoma Development Center is, and it's only as and it's fairly very big property, enough for people who are mentally disabled lived. And my mom was one of the people that helped take care of him. My mom was a CN, like a CN nurse or something like that. And then if you keep driving a little further down, you cross this bridge, and then you're back in Glen Ellen. That's how it went. So my parents met Sonoma Development Center, and they got together. My mother white, and Jewish, and my father is black and Baptist. My father's name is Calso Thomas Jr. He was named after his father, Calso Thomas Sr. So my parents met, and then they got married while my mother was pregnant with me, and they got married in Reno, and then I was born. And my father, for better or for worse, for better or for worse, he was always there. He had some troubles dealing with drugs, cocaine, weed. He was a bit of an alcoholic. And my mother gave my father a choice. He could either stop with the drugs and the drinking. He can either choose me and my mom or the drugs and the alcohol. And that moment right there, my father quit. He didn't quit everything. My mother was okay with my dad smoking weed as long as I wasn't in the house. But the cocaine and the drinking, it had to stop. And my father stopped. Cold turkey. I don't know how he did it, but he did it. And my father was around. And then when I was a toddler, so like about 2, he became a diabetic, got diagnosed as a diabetic, and his life completely changed. He wasn't working as much, and eventually, and that led into him having to leave his job after he got hurt at work. And the doctor said he couldn't work again because of his arm. He hurt his, like right here, between his hand and his arm, like his wrist. And the doctor told him he couldn't work anymore. He couldn't do any heavy lifting. That's what required him to do for his job. So he essentially retired. He essentially had to retire. But because of the money that my mom was making working for Sonoma Development Center, it was enough. And this was late 80s into the 90s. It was enough to support my dad and me and my mom. And plus my dad was also beginning to get retirement at that time. So the money that he was getting from his retirement, plus the money that my mom was making working, and the occasional double shift overtime, it was enough. It was enough. And that's all you need. All you need is enough. But my dad was always there. He'd take me to school. He would cook. He was always there. And my dad would always let me watch rated R movies, you know? But there were things in my father's life that when I would ask him questions about, he wouldn't tell me. There were things that he would say, and there were things he wouldn't say. And I think there were things that there were reasons why he was so overprotective when it came to me. Why there were certain, like if I wanted to spend the night at a friend's house or ride my bike downtown Sonoma by myself, there were certain things that my father was overprotective of when it came to me, and at times my mother, that freaked him out. And I found out after his death that it had to do with him being part of a gang, that being part of a gang in his youth, and that he was worried that they eventually would find him and use them and use me and my mother to get to him. That was never the case. Um, yeah, that was never the case. But my father was. There were times where my father was a little paranoid about that and very overprotective. But my father was a good dad. He was always there. I know my half siblings wouldn't say the same thing about my father. He wasn't there for them as much as he was there for me. By the time I was born, they were already all grown up. They were adults themselves, but that does not excuse my father for how he was with his kids. And I think there was also some pushback on them about their hate towards me and my mother. They didn't like that our father was with my mother. So a lot of hate that they had towards my parents and towards my dad being with my mother, they put towards me. And that caused a very big strain, a lot of distance, where I didn't see them for years at a time. So I know I have nieces and nephews and cousins that I never met, all because of that. And as hard as I tried to be in contact and be with them, it didn't matter because of how they felt towards me at the end of all of it. So that just is what it is when it comes to that family. But my father was always there. As I've said many times, it was wow. Anyway, so it had reached a point where my father in 2016, because everything that happened from the 80s and on, when it comes to my father always being there, he would take me to Sugarloaf when I was a kid. And this was late 80s into the 90s. He got a season pass every year so that I could ride my bike freely at this state park. And my father would always be talking to one of the park rangers there while I go ride my bike. So I love that my father did that because he knew how much I loved riding my bike. And since I couldn't really do that where we lived in the apartment complex because of the manager, he would get a season pass at Sugarloaf, which is a state park in Kenwood, just right outside. It's out, and Kenwood is just outside of Glen Ellen. He would do that, and I think he did that for two reasons. One, so I could ride my bike in more open spaces safely and freely, and secondly, he loved going to Sugarloaf. Sugarloaf for my father is for me going to Sausalito for me. And I love that he did that. And usually after we go to Sugarloaf, we would go to Santa Rosa. They had this electronics store at the time called The Good Guys. It was off of Guerneville Road. And we'd go there and he would either get me a video game for Nintendo or he would like to look at the big screen TVs at times, and he would like to look at the electronics and stuff. So, I mean, that's where I get that. I get that from my dad. And he would, as I got older, he would tell me things, what it was like to be black in America. And those stories that he would tell me, I knew they were hard for him to tell because he was picking from his own life and telling me these stories of how America, how people will view me, because I am biracial. But just because I'm biracial doesn't mean America, the people will see me as such, that people will see me as they see everyone else around the world in solid colors. And in solid colors, you have black, white, yellow, and brown. And to be proud of who I am, right? Half black, half white, Jewish. Be proud of my culture and heritage and all of that stuff, but also recognize that when people look at you, they will look at you as a black man, and they will treat you as such. And I always kept that to heart. And especially when it comes to dealing with the police, that was some of the hardest talks we had, because it was so hard for him to talk about that, of him reliving moments of dealing with the police, whether dealing with the police beating on him or arresting him for whatever reason they had. My father in his youth dealt with the police several times in Los Angeles, California, during that time in the 50s and 60s. And my father just, yeah. My father loved music, so I got into music because of my father. And I will get into that another time. But my father is one of those reasons how I got into music. And he would always play. He had this truck, this red Chevy S10 Tahoe truck. It was red, had a white stripe on it. And I loved being in that truck. The red leather seats. Loved being in that truck. Play music. The music was always playing, whether it was Luther Vandross, Marvin Gaye, Atlantic Starr, Aretha Franklin, anything Motown, anything from the Philly Sound back in the day, all of it. I grew up listening to all of it. In 2016, when my father started to get really sick, I stopped working as a preschool teacher to help take care of my dad. We found out, when my father found out what he had and that he didn't have much time, I mean, he could fight it if he wanted to, but my father reached a point in his life when he was done fighting, that he was tired, and he just wanted to spend whatever time he had left. And that's what we did. I stopped working so I could spend all the time I could with him and help my mother out as much as possible. And my parents moved into this condo, which I am telling this story in. And in 2019, right before 2019, in 2018, as we got into like Thanksgiving and Christmas, I usually when I look up into the sky, sometimes I feel like I am talking to God. In this particular moment, I really was talking to him, and I asked him that I could have the rest of 2018 with my father. And I believe he listened to me in that moment, because my father was around for Thanksgiving, and he was around for Christmas. And then he made it to New Year's Day. And then January 8th, 2019, on a Tuesday, my father passed away. And I remember it being a little after 4 a.m. My mother it was very easy for my mother to wake me up that particular morning. And I went into where my father's room was, and I just looked at him. He was so cold and so still. He was gone, and it was just a shell of who my father was in that body. But he was gone. But he wasn't suffering anymore. He wasn't in pain. He was at peace. He was finally at peace. And there are moments when I like to think that my father, as he was crossing over, as he would say, that his mother was there to take his hand and guide him to the other side. A few months later, after we had his ashes for a couple of months, my mother and I had my father's ashes for a couple of months. It was so hard to find the right time to let him to spread him, to let him go. So on this day, on June 1st, my father's birthday, we got in my car and we drove to Sausalito. And because that's where my father wanted his ashes spread, in Sausalito. So we went up to Sausalito, and I parked my car and we walked a little while and found a tree and we said a few words. My mom said a few words, and then I spread his ashes. It was just my mom and I, and we spread his ashes. And it kind of just drifted. It's kind of like in a movie. They just drifted, and it was like that was it. He was free, and he was up there. I still haven't gone up to Sugarloaf. I haven't been up to Sugarloaf since then to say hi. I have a hard time. I haven't been able to do it because it's still hard. 7 years later, it's still hard for me. There was a moment after my mom and I spread his ashes as we went over to where my father would take me to ride my bike. And it was so different. Like the bridge wasn't there anymore. It was just concrete. And it seemed a little bit smaller than it was when I was a kid. It's amazing how big things look when you're a kid versus when you're an adult, and those same things are a lot smaller than they used to look when you were a kid. But I stood there and felt a breeze, and in that moment it felt like my father's hand was on my shoulder, and it felt like I was having this last moment with my father. And I closed my eyes and I said, "I get it, Dad. I get it." And that was it. Let me just read a little something really quick, because I did say I was going to read a little something. 160. Sorry, I don't have this like upright prepared. There's so much. I'm just going to read the beginning of the chapter. Or actually, let me. Here we go. Since my father's death, oh no, not that. You know what? I'm just going to read this part right here. You can't pause or restart time. Like life, time keeps moving forward. With a snap of a finger, my father was gone. The time I thought I had was over. And in that moment, I felt as if my life was over. My life stopped making sense. And now I feel. I'll let you know when I know. But one of many things I've learned since my father passed away is that time waits for no one. How I feel is I have my moments when I'm not okay. I'm not okay, and I really miss my father. And on days like my father's birthday, on Father's Day, which comes up in a couple weeks, during Thanksgiving, Christmas, those are the moments when I really miss my father. And when my father's death date comes around on January 8th, I flash back to it, how I felt, how he looked. But I keep him right here with me, and I have photos to remember him, and I'll never forget my father. I just wish that he was still here. As I'm single, I'm still very single, and I just wish he was still here to meet the woman that I hope to still fall in love with and hope to marry, and the grandkids that I was hoping he would get to meet, but never will. But if I ever have kids, I will tell my kids stories about their grandfather, about who he was, and what he was to me. My father was everything to me. He was a once-in-a-lifetime kind of father. And I feel like a lot of kids can say that about their father. But he was to me. And I will miss him forever. But anyway, that was a little story time about my father on a day where it would have been his birthday today. He would have still been in his 80s. I think he would have been 87. He would have been 87 years old today. Anyway, a little story time from my life in a nutshell. Appreciate you for watching. I'm Anthony K. Thomas. Again, if you'd like to check out this book right here, go ahead and hit that Linktree link in my bio. And while you're here on my channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you keep up when I drop story times from this book or any other book that I might talk about, and episodes like Backseat Reading, where I do a little bit reading from a particular book that I have out that's available now. And when I drop another video doing a reading from Matthew the Toy Story prequel, a story about Andy's father. Those videos are on there as well. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit a like, leave a comment. It all helps. I appreciate all of you. Take care of yourselves. If you got someone in your life that you love and care about, tell them while you can, while they're still here, because life is short. Sometimes it's shorter than we expect it. And so much time can be wasted on waiting. So don't wait. Tell them while you can. And I will see you all on that next one. Take care of yourselves. Peace, y'all.